My name is Jessica Jess Tall. I'm a fourth-year medical student at Marshall University Joan C. Edwards School of Medicine. I'm also both multiracial and multi-ethnic, a writer, a bookworm, painter, and that list goes on. For me, the theme of connecting threads can mean a multitude of things. In fact, when I was told it could mean bringing together a lot of different ideas, clothes, or even the new app, I got excited. I even thought of myself due to my own identities and interests and how I can use my many threads to connect with others. On the topic of threads, I think of it as our identities. I believe when most people think of identities, especially when it comes to racial or ethnicity makeup, it's kind of like a pie chart full of percentages, such as 50% white, 50% black, or 25% Chinese and 75% Irish, etc. However, I would like to propose a change to this idea. I think identities and being mixed, which is something I can personally speak upon, is more like having a wardrobe. For example, when I first thought of individuals who were monoracial or monoethnic, I imagined them having a cotton shirt that's fully black, or a complete striped long sleeve. I used to think that those who were fully one race or ethnicity never had to justify or prove that they are of that background. However, being mixed is not like wearing a fashionable Coogee sweater where you have a ton of cool colors and patterns coming together to weave this comfortable sweater. I used to think being mixed was like having a cotton short sleeve on the right, some denim neck collar, a left woolly long sleeve, and some weird rhinestone mesh down the middle. It honestly felt like Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas, where you're kind of a different garment sewn together but not one wearable shirt. You can kind of go out on a fall day, but now your right arm is cold, and if you're trying to relax on the beach, good luck with that left sweaty arm. Part of you is everywhere, yet you don't feel like you belong anywhere. That wasn't until I learned through my many interactions and relationships that I was wrong. One story that comes to my mind involves my mentoring with the local Fairfield U mentoring program, where I first met my mentee. The Fairfield U Mentor Program pairs local middle school and high school students with medical students from Marshall's Medical School, in which we help give them advice about STEM pathways while also hosting monthly educational meetings to increase exposure in these fields and even help empower them to pursue these careers. When I first met my mentee, I thought we would not be able to establish a good connection. I'd never had a male mentee before, and I didn't think we had a lot in common. This was far from the truth. With more digging, I found out that we came from similar backgrounds, faced similar hardships, and even had similar hobbies. My mentee is African American and also comes from a low socioeconomic status background. He was in many AP classes and also had to work jobs to help support his mother and brothers, similarly to how I did with my sisters. I found out that it wasn't that he didn't care about science, but he had other pressing matters to attend to. I also found out that he was trying to get his license, and through taking the extra time and helping him learn how to drive, I found out that he loves Paramore and other punk music. I found out that I wasn't the only one with a patched up shirt. My mentee also had mixed matched shirts as well. I found out that instead of hiding our colorful shirts, that we had a lot in common, woven by the same threads that connected our experiences together. I found out that if I took a thread and pulled it out and saw the various clothes that made up my shirt, I could actually make 5 shirts. I now had something for the gala, for the barbecue, for the mentoring events, and even the clinic. I realized my perceived patchwork sweater was actually a whole wardrobe. I just wasn't pulling at that patchwork to see all the clothing that I had. I needed to do introspection and deconstruction, to not only reconstruct myself, but to build connections with others. Another example of this idea of identity presentation and connection, especially in terms of being introspective and vulnerable, is during some of my patient encounters I had during clinical rotations. One of those experiences was dealing with a teen who was having breakthrough seizures due to her not being medically compliant with her anti-seizure medication. Some people might ask, why not take your medication to ensure you're okay? However, instead of only asking her about her medication, I asked her about her life. She had a very active life and was in many advanced courses in school. After getting to know her, I saw that she had on a metaphorical turtleneck. And in a sea of white coats, I too have a patient turtleneck I wear underneath my own scrubs. When I was in high school, I suffered with seizures. They prevented me from being able to drive and also forced me to spend a lot of time in doctors' offices. I use the patient turtleneck because one's medical conditions are not always front and center. It's sometimes suffocating for some, too tight around their necks, and it can even make them feel restricted, itchy, or sweaty. When you're around the age of 16, everybody says you grow up when you get your driver's license. So what happens when you're not medically advised or legally allowed to reach adulthood like your peers? People who have similarly been in this sick role understand this without being asked. They instantly place this on their differential. When I have spoken to some of these individuals, we are then able to address other health comorbidities, such as mental health, access to care, and other important social determinants of health. Because when I'm able to be vulnerable enough to use my own experiences and share it, it helps create a safe space where now the patient can share their own outfit, their own experiences, and their own perspectives. I state this example to show that irregardless of race or ethnicity, we all at one point have a shared experience. I do want to briefly address how others talk about identity, especially in terms of identity presentation, racial and ethnic makeup, and et cetera. When I have mentioned wardrobes and outfits and switching in and out of them, some might think of the concept of code switching, which is different but also important. An article from 2019 in the Harvard Business Review titled "The Cost of Code Switching" defines code switching as a behavioral adjustment in which Black individuals will change their manner of speaking, appearance, or behavior, specifically in settings that typically have negative outlooks and views about Black individuals, in order to survive their work environment or have safety in a society in which they may be marginalized or oppressed. However, what I'm exploring deals with our commonalities. I've also discovered that the idea of people having a wardrobe just made more sense to me, especially in terms of what I mean about identity. You get to choose what you change into and still have all of your outfits in your wardrobe, irregardless. Also, a lot of times when we talk about being mixed or diverse, it's centered around food, such as a melting pot or a fruit salad, which has its merits, such as showing the many parts of an individual. But I think realizing that identity is like having a wardrobe creates fewer limits. A wardrobe can show the fluidity a person has and how interchangeable aspects of themselves can be presented depending on the situation, and even if they're not presenting certain aspects of themselves, they still have those aspects or articles of clothing in their wardrobe. That's how I came to realize that my identity was not one sweater, but rather a whole closet full of fits that I could change into according to the weather, event, and even my own comfort. I learned that presenting myself fully enabled me to see the various ways in which I could connect with others from various backgrounds. These backgrounds included race, ethnicity, sex, gender, etc. And that if everybody else also fully presents themselves, then interpersonal relationships can be improved. We can see that we have more commonalities with one another and be able to connect with more people across different races, ethnicities, hobbies, careers, and so on and so forth. In fact, going back to the clothing analogy, my mentee showed me that if I started to pull apart the threads that kept my perceived patchwork sweater from earlier together, that I could actually make pieces, or in reality, connections that would span and supersede. Throughout all of these experiences and seeing others also having these experiences, I found out I'm not just a torn off cotton sleeve, but a whole cotton shirt with a whole wool sweater. Just like how I'm not part Black or part Latina. Similarly to the actor and content creator Ryan Alexander Holmes, I learned that I'm 100% Black, 100% Latina. And I can even expand this further to experiences and connections in the fact that I'm 100% a medical student, an artist, a mentor, and a former patient. And I can use my many experiences, 100s, and outfits to become a better clinician, a better mentor. I know that the math of multiple 100s doesn't make this perfect mathematical sense, but I don't think human identities and connections are these perfect simple equations. I think if we stop seeing each other as these random percentages, but rather as beautiful articles of clothing that when we pair, we can make a beautiful wardrobe which we can self-select from in order to aid one another and even guide each other and make everlasting connections we would have maybe never made before. I know some may believe that this is a weird way of thinking, but I think if we pull on each other's threads and see all the material that we can make or have in common, that we too can have a diverse wardrobe in which everyone can get along. Thank you.